I would like to start by saying that I have never really been close to my dad. I just learned to tolerate him all my life. Growing up with him was a constant struggle as he turned both mine and my mother's life into a living hell. My dad had a minimum wage job at a factory, and every day after finishing his shift, he would head straight to the bar where he'd spend hours drinking with random strangers. He would then come back home late at night, reeking of alcohol and unable to walk properly. As soon as he stepped through the door, the tension in the house would spike as he would often pick fights with my mom, complaining loudly about how the house wasn't clean enough or how things weren't organized to his liking. These arguments were usually loud and upsetting, and they were a regular occurrence. I would often be in my room trying to stay out of the way, either watching my favorite series or chatting with friends on the phone. But then he would storm into my room and yell at me for being awake. He would proceed to ground me on the spot despite my protests and take away all my electronic devices like my phone and laptop. However, there was one small relief in this chaos. His drinking made him incredibly forgetful. By the next morning, he wouldn't remember much of what happened the night before. So I learned to quietly get back my confiscated items once he had passed out on the sofa or in the bedroom. He never noticed, and by the time he woke up, everything would be back the way it was, with no memory of the punishment he had imposed. By the time I was 13, I was getting thoroughly exhausted and fed up with my dad's behavior. Some nights, he wouldn't even come home, choosing instead to stay late at the bar and then hook up with random strangers. My mom would call him repeatedly, only to be met with his angry, screaming responses. After these calls, I would watch her cry herself to sleep, feeling helpless. Dad would then only come back home in the early hours of the morning. He would try to trudge up the stairs as quietly as possible in his drunken stupor and collapse onto the bed next to my mom as if his behavior was completely acceptable. If my mom tried to talk to him about it the next day, he would gaslight her by saying she was being overly dramatic and sensitive. He would also accuse her of not satisfying him enough, which is why he was getting it from other women. If you're wondering how I know all this, it's because as an only child in a dysfunctional home, I had nothing else to do. I would often try to listen to their bedroom conversations, especially when they were fighting, because mostly I would be worried about my mom. I know I shouldn't have done that, but whenever I heard them fighting, my heart would start to race in anxiety. And yes, I have also seen my dad beat up my mother on some occasions. He would either twist her hand until she screamed in pain or bang her head on the countertop, leaving a mark on her forehead. If I sometimes didn't listen to him, he would even slap me and lock me in our washroom with no lights on until I gave in to his demands. The first time I realized that I truly hated my dad was on my 16th birthday. Normally, he never allowed me to have birthday parties, dismissing them as a waste of money. But this year was different. My mom had saved up all year just to fulfill my wish for a small celebration. I invited a few friends over so that we could enjoy pizza and soft drinks while watching a movie in my room. It was a simple, low-key party, and we were having a good time. Suddenly, my dad barged into my room, yelling at us for being too loud. The atmosphere shifted instantly. My friends went quiet and their smiles disappearing. I tried to calm him down, telling him we would keep the noise down, but he kept yelling at me that this was his house and I should respect his space. His anger was overwhelming, and in that moment I felt nothing but deep resentment towards him. This was supposed to be a rare, happy moment for me, and he shattered it with his rage. However, that's not all that my dad did that night. He, instead of leaving us politely, decided to stick around and started talking to my friends, asking their names and about their parents. When he got to some of my female friends, I noticed his eyes go up and down their bodies slowly, and he gave an appreciative nod. I felt a wave of disgust wash over me, and I could see the awkwardness in my friends' faces as they glanced at me uncomfortably. Then he looked back at me and said, "Why can't you take care of yourself and look as hot as them?" Hearing him say that was just beyond creepy. Like, dude, we are 16-year-old kids. I felt my face burning with embarrassment, mortified not just by his words, but by the fact that he was doing this in front of my friends. It was a moment that truly cemented my hatred for him. After this incident, I realized I didn't want my dad in my life anymore. I wanted him gone. But no matter how much I tried to talk to my mom about it, she refused to take me seriously. My mom had always been this way. No matter what my dad did to her, she always stood by him. It was infuriating to see how conditioned she had become to his abuse and insults, to the point where she couldn't even imagine a life without him. Whenever I brought it up, my mom would tell me how alcohol had changed my dad and insist that he was actually a very nice person. She would bring up how he would bring her flowers every Valentine's Day and treat her right back when they were newly married. Her words only made me angrier because I had never seen this supposedly nice man. All I ever saw was a cruel, angry, abusive father who made our lives miserable. It was heartbreaking to see my mom defend him and cling to a version of him that only existed in her memories. If you're wondering why my mother ever married him, it's because she lost both her parents in a car accident when she was young. My dad was her boyfriend at the time, and after what she went through, she clung to him even more. Despite all their fights, she refused to let him go. I guess in her mind, she was terrified of being abandoned again. So they eventually got married and had me. It was only after I was born that my dad changed. Maybe he didn't want the responsibility of a child. Or maybe he just got bored of playing the family man. Whatever the reasons, he clearly had become a different person. My mom always held on to the idea that he was a good person deep down, but all I saw was the man who made our lives a living hell. When I graduated from high school, my dad didn't even bother to attend my graduation. He dismissed it, saying he didn't want to sit through a boring and childish ceremony. It stung, but I tried to shrug it off and focus on celebrating this milestone with my mom, who was there for me. Later that night, I decided to go to a party with my friends to mark the occasion. We were just dancing, having a good time with no wild antics. I did not even drink alcohol or smoke weed. I just wanted to enjoy one of the last nights with my friends before we all went off to colleges across the country. However, my dad started calling me, demanding that I come back home immediately. At first, I tried to calm him down and tell him how it was just a party and I was not doing anything bad. But he kept calling over the night, his tone growing angrier with each call. Eventually, he threatened to show up at the party and drag me out in front of everyone if I didn't return right away. I felt a knot of anxiety tightening in my stomach. I knew he would make good on his threat, and the thought of being humiliated in front of my friends was unbearable. I finally gave in and went home, my celebration cut short. As soon as I walked through the door, he was waiting for me, his face twisted in anger. He started yelling at me, accusing me of defying his orders and staying out past 9 p.m. His accusations were laced with insinuations about how this is how girls get pregnant, his words dripping with disdain and judgment. I tried to explain my side of the story to tell him that I was just celebrating with my friends, not doing anything wrong. But before I could finish my sentence, he slapped me hard across the face. The force of the blow left me stunned and tears sprang to my eyes. I opened my mouth to try again, hoping to reason with him, but he slapped me on the other side of my face even harder this time. The pain was sharp and immediate, but what hurt more was the humiliation and degradation. It was like he saw me as nothing more than a disobedient child, someone whose feelings and experiences didn't matter. Tears streamed down my cheeks as the sting of his blow sank in. It wasn't just the physical pain. It was the emotional wound that cut the deepest, the feeling of being worthless and powerless against my mean old dad. That night, I cried myself to sleep, the tears soaking into my pillow. As I lay there in the dark, I made a promise to myself that I would go far, far away from this wretched place as soon as I could. I would escape his control and build a life where I was valued and respected. I swore that I would never let him make me feel this way again. This promise fueled my determination to apply to some of the best universities in the country, and I was thrilled when I finally received a full scholarship to one of them. My dad, however, was furious about my decision to move across the country. He tried to dissuade me, insisting that girls like me didn't need so much education and that a community college would suffice. He even argued that I should get married early and settle down so I don't end up like other childless women. But for the first time, I decided to stand up to him and refuse to back down. In his anger, he tried to lock me in my room and even threatened to call the university to cancel my admission. Desperate but resolute, I came up with a plan. I told him I would give him some of the money from my scholarship so he could use the money as he pleased, knowing how greedy he was. The lure of easy money worked, and he reluctantly agreed to let me go, thinking that I would actually send him money. However, as soon as I arrived at college, I blocked his number from my phone. I had moved all my belongings out of the house, so I had nothing left to tie me there. My dad tried to show up at my college once, but I threatened to call the police on him, which scared him off. Once I had cut off contact with him, I felt an overwhelming sense of relief. It was as if a massive weight had been lifted from my chest. All throughout college, I did try my best to stay in touch with my mom, who would call me occasionally when my dad wasn't around. However, our relationship was strained because she always defended him even after all this. Despite this, I loved my mom and I wish I could have spent more time with her. I held on to a dream during those college years, a dream of liberating my mom from my dad's toxic influence and showing her a life full of happiness and possibilities. I believed that if I worked hard, achieved success, and built a stable life, I could provide her with the joy and fulfillment she truly deserved. I hoped she would see that life could be beautiful away from the monster my dad had become. Unfortunately, life has a way of disrupting our plans. Just a year after I graduated from college, my world would shatter when my mother passed away. She had a heart attack in her sleep, probably worsened by years of smoking she had started doing due to stress and unhappiness in her life. When my parents' acquaintances called to deliver the news, I couldn't comprehend it at first and refused to believe it until I saw her lifeless body in the coffin. It was then that the weight of her absence hit me like a ton of bricks. Her passing has left a gaping hole in my heart. I still haven't completely recovered from the shock and grief of losing her. I still carry a profound sense of regret that I couldn't provide her with the happiness she deserved, and that I couldn't rescue her from the torment of living with my dad. After my mother's passing, my dad had a profound realization of just how much he had taken her for granted all those years. It's surprising how sometimes, even in the darkest moments, a glimmer of something good can emerge. At the funeral, when he saw me, he broke down completely. He hugged me tightly and cried for hours on my shoulder, mourning the loss of my mom. Initially, I was skeptical of his emotions. I wondered if he was just drunk, as he often was. But it turned out that his grief was genuine. He repeatedly expressed to me how he couldn't imagine life without her, how much he missed her, and how deeply he regretted not treating her right when she was alive. His words stirred a mix of emotions in me, ranging from anger at his past behavior to sadness for his current state of despair. Later, there were moments when I caught him in the bedroom crying while holding my mother's photograph to his chest. He was an absolute wreck, consumed by sorrow and guilt. It was a stark contrast to the man I had known growing up. My mother didn't have many possessions, but she had a jewelry box filled with handmade pieces and some inexpensive gold jewelry. It was something she treasured, and before she passed, she had expressed her desire for me to have it. Those pieces now hold a special place in my heart. As I prepared to return back to college after my mother's funeral, I felt a mix of emotions. Leaving my dad behind, especially in his fragile state, was difficult. However, I couldn't afford to miss too much class time. However, my dad did something completely unexpected. He apologized to me. For the first time ever, my dad acknowledged his faults and expressed genuine remorse for the pain he had caused me and my mother over the years. He admitted that my mother's sudden passing had jolted him into facing reality, and he despised himself for the way he had treated us. He pleaded with me for a second chance, promising to change and be a better father. Despite his heartfelt apology, I couldn't simply erase all the years of hurt and mistreatment. I told him that if he truly meant what he said, he would have to demonstrate it through his actions. I made it clear that I needed to see proof of his commitment to change for a better man. To my surprise, my dad has kept his promise to me over the years. He actively tries to be a better father, making efforts to stay connected with me. I unblocked him after the funeral so he could call me every weekend just to talk. He no longer asks me for money or makes me feel guilty about my decisions. He genuinely listens to me, asking about my day and showing interest in my life. Even when I share details about what my parents and I were up to, he refrains from passing judgment. It has been a slow and gradual process, but I have started to see glimpses of the father I had always hoped for, a caring and supportive presence in my life. While I still remain cautious and guarded because of the years of abuse and trauma I went through, I can't deny that he has put in the effort to improve our relationship. This is why a year ago, when my dad confessed that he had cheated on my mother years ago and had recently discovered that he had another child, I was taken aback but tried to remain composed for the sake of the progress we had made in our relationship. He seemed genuinely shocked by the news, just as I was, as the woman he had an affair with had knowingly kept it a secret from him for years. He was lost and unsure of what to do, so he turned to me for advice. Despite the betrayal and hurt caused by his infidelity, I surprisingly didn't feel the urge to yell or lash out at him. The past was already written, and no amount of anger or reprimanding could change that. When he asked for guidance, I encouraged him to meet with his daughter, my supposed half-sister. It might sound strange, but I didn't feel jealousy or animosity towards this new person. Yes, he had cheated on my mother, which was deeply hurtful and wrong, but what mattered now was how we navigated this new reality and made his daughter feel welcome. My dad did meet with my half-sister, Zenica, and it turned out that she was just as curious to get to know me after she found out about having a sister. She told Dad that she was married to her husband, Cole, and they were trying to start a family of their own. Eventually, after a few meetings with her, my dad arranged a lunch date for the three of us to meet, and honestly, I found Zenica to be genuinely nice. We exchanged numbers and started texting occasionally. I was pleasantly surprised by how well we got along. It felt good to connect with someone who shared a part of my family history. My dad would often update me when he went to meet Zanika, and I was glad that he had found someone else to talk to other than me, as he got pretty lonely some days. 2 weeks ago, my dad called me with urgent news about Zanika. He explained that she was in a difficult situation and needed a safe place to stay. Apparently, Zanika had caught her husband Cole cheating on her, leading to a heated argument between them. Things escalated when Cole threatened her with violence, prompting Zanika to pack her bags and leave their home in fear. My dad pleaded with me to let Zanika stay at my place for a few days, as he believed she would feel more comfortable and secure with me rather than with him. Without hesitation, I agreed. I reached out to Zanika and offered her to come over to my place, which she gratefully accepted, thanking me profusely over the phone. When Zanika arrived at my place, it was clear that she was in distress. Her hair was unkempt and her clothes looked like they hadn't been washed in days. Seeing her like that reminded me of my mom and the years of abuse she endured at the hands of my dad. It stirred up a deep sense of sadness and empathy for Zanika, and I felt a strong urge to protect her from any harm. Zanika had been staying with me since then, and while she's been an okay roommate overall, there are some challenges. Unlike me, who has a job, Zanika is currently unemployed. She spends her time either sleeping in bed, scrolling through her phone, or watching reality TV shows like Housewives on my couch. I've encouraged her to explore job opportunities, but she seems hesitant. She has expressed that she doesn't want to start with entry-level positions that pay very less money, as she finds it humiliating. I've tried to explain to her that without any experience, she can't really expect companies to pay her on par with other employees who have years of experience. However, it's been a struggle to get through to her. On some days, I've attempted to motivate her to go outside by inviting her to join me for workouts at the gym or yoga classes, even offering to cover the expenses, but she keeps declining. It's clear that she's struggling mentally. When we talk, I've sometimes gently suggested that she consider therapy in the future if she feels comfortable, as I believe she should talk out her true feelings with someone professional. Meanwhile, I've noticed that Cole calls her every day, but she chooses to ignore his calls, which I completely understand given the circumstances. However, yesterday something happened that has changed my entire perspective towards her. She had gone off to spend the day with my dad, leaving me with a rare opportunity to have the apartment to myself. I am still adjusting to having a roommate at my house, so having the day to myself felt like a relief. As I was preparing my lunch in the afternoon, the doorbell rang. Assuming it was a delivery or perhaps a letter from one of my friends, I made my way to the door and greeted the mailman. He handed me an envelope, which I accepted without checking the name on it, assuming it was mine. I tore open the envelope and began reading the contents of the letter inside. The handwriting was unfamiliar, and it took a moment for the words to register. To my astonishment, I realized that the letter was addressed to Zanika from her husband, Cole. Confusion swept over me momentarily as I wondered why she would receive mail at my address. As I continued reading Cole's letter, the shock and disbelief grew with each word. In the letter, Cole accused Zanika of abusing him and recounting how after their recent fight he had ended up in the hospital needing stitches after she had punched him in the face. He even attached a Polaroid of his wound, which looked severe and ghastly. My eyes widened in horror as I processed the gravity of his accusations. Cole had then gone on to write how she needed to take care of herself now that she was pregnant. He wrote how she had no right to hide such a significant piece of information from him for the past 3 months, and how he only found out about the pregnancy when she attempted to secretly visit a gynecologist to have an abortion. This revelation was especially jarring for me because Zanika had not even once mentioned it to me in the 2 weeks that she had lived here. In fact, I had even observed her drinking alcohol all by herself some of the nights. In the letter, Cole pleaded with Zanika to stop fighting with him and to come back home. He assured her that getting pregnant was not the worst thing in the world and that he would take 100% responsibility for the child if she didn't want to be a mother. He urged her to take care of herself for the sake of the unborn child and mentioned that she could leave the child with him, guilt-free, once she was born. Cole's words left me stunned and deeply concerned for Zanika. It was a shocking revelation of who my half-sister really was and how she had clearly hidden this vital information from me all along. Then I decided to do something that I would have never even thought about doing before: check her bag. Rummaging through the bag, I found a positive pregnancy test which she had kept hidden. This proved exactly what Cole had written. I was seriously concerned now and didn't know what to do with her. I felt like a fool for not noticing that she was pregnant all along, which is why she had been so moody. I decided to confront Zanika when she came back home. However, when she did reach my place, she looked completely drunk and out of her mind. She was giggling uncontrollably and falling down all over the place. Concerned, I helped her onto the couch and inquired about her well-being. To my astonishment, Zanika then casually mentioned she had a small fender bender while driving back home, laughing it off as if it were a trivial matter. Alarmed, I rushed to check her car and noticed she had a small but significant dent in the front. My worry deepened as I questioned her if she had hit a person or an animal, perhaps. But Zanika's responses were scattered and nonsensical in her drunken state. At that time, I felt like I had no other choice but to call the police and report the accident. My hands were shaking as I made the call, unsure of if I was doing the right thing. Seeing Zanika, who was pregnant and clearly not in her right mind, involved in an accident was alarming. It wasn't just about her safety, but also about the well-being of her unborn baby and everyone else on the road. The police arrived promptly and began questioning Zanika. They also mentioned that they would review the CCTV footage from nearby areas to determine what she had collided with. I informed them about Zanika's car camera recorder and they collected it for examination. Despite their inquiries, Zanika was unable to provide coherent answers or an explanation. However, after watching the footage, it was evident that Zanika had exceeded the speed limit and crashed into someone's fence, which was a serious offense. The police made the decision to arrest her and informed me that they needed to take her into custody. I didn't intervene or try to stop them. This morning, my dad called me furious about my sister's arrest, demanding that I bail her out. He questioned whether I was the one who reported her to the authorities. I fired back, asking him if he was aware that she was pregnant. His brief pause indicated that he had no clue either. I explained to him the gravity of the situation and how Zanika had been abusing Cole and was now jeopardizing her child's safety. However, my dad's perspective was different. He believed that I should have spoken to my sister instead of involving the authorities, telling me how what I did was going to tarnish the family reputation. AITA for calling the police on my half-sister? Update 1. Hey, I'm really glad to see that there are other sane people like me who understand why I did what I did. After reading all your comments, I feel so validated because up until now, I felt like I should have perhaps done things the way my dad says I should have done. To quickly update you guys, I called Cole and requested him to collect Zanika's belongings before she got out on bail, as I no longer wished to have any association with her. When he arrived, I confessed to him that I had read his letter accidentally and apologized to him. I went on to explain that I had been unaware of Zanika's pregnancy and the fact that I had noticed her drinking while she had stayed with me. Cole shook his head and opened up about Zanika's struggle with BPD, borderline personality disorder. He explained how her mood swings had intensified since becoming pregnant, causing frequent and severe episodes of violence directed at him. He told me that she would often resort to physical violence, and he had learned to keep his mouth shut since he didn't want her to end up in jail. This revelation made me sympathize deeply with Cole and his situation, as I knew exactly what he was going through. I chose not to delve deeper into Cole and Zanika's relationship or urge him to leave her because, quite frankly, it's not my place to interfere. I understand and acknowledge that no matter what advice or encouragement I offer, Cole may still choose to stay with Zanika until he realizes his own worth and learns to prioritize his own well-being enough to walk away from such a challenging situation. For his sake, I hope he soon does. Now, regarding my dad, I've asked him for space after the way he treated me. I explained to him that Zanika's behavior reminds me so much of him, which further triggers painful memories and trauma that I've experienced in the past. I have made it clear that I want nothing to do with his daughter and that I would even cut ties with him if he doesn't encourage her to become a better person for the sake of her unborn baby. My dad hasn't yet apologized to me and continues to believe that I should not have involved the authorities. For now, I'm going to continue to live my life in peace and focus on my job without involving myself in any more drama. Stay tuned for more stories from Argo Relationships.